Welcome. This is the Back End Bear podcast, where we discuss anything related to programming, algorithms, and the latest practices in the coding world. So sit back, grab a drink, enjoy it, and let's dig right into it. How's it going, people? Hope you're having a great start of the week. You're being productive, you're coding hard, and you can't wait for Friday to come in. Well, this week I have an interview, and I'm doing an interview with Lee Warrick, and he's from a very interesting podcast called TechJR. So if you're a junior developer and want to make it in the tech industry and find a job easy, you should definitely listen to that podcast. We discussed how to get started in the industry. We talked about, general team chemistry and the latest technologies and how to swim in all of that. And we tackled the importance or non-importance of the education. And yes, I know there are certain issues in our education system and in the industry generally, especially in the hiring department. And in this episode, we kind of try to share our thoughts on those and try to tackle that problem. So sit back, relax, and without further ado, let's dig right into it. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the Back End Bear podcast. Today I have a guest with me, and I would like to do a bit of introduction, like in a bit of poetry type of style way. So this is gonna be silly, but let's give it a shot. So this might be good, or I might crash and burn. But anyway, so let's give it a shot. So if you just started as a programmer and want to make it far, stay a while and listen to TechJR. Their podcast is streaming from coast to coast, and junior developers like it the most. They will make sure that you pass that test, and their host, Lee Warrick, is my guest. So, welcome, Lee.
Thank you. That was amazing. That's beautiful.
I always try kind of to make like an interesting intro, so
you nailed it.
I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, so my name's Lee Warrick. I'm a front-end developer. I co-host the Tech Junior podcast with Edwin Otero, and we're all about helping junior developers, interviewing people in the industry, and just kind of asking them the dumb questions that we have that probably a lot of people have, and just trying to clear up a lot of confusion out there.
That sounds good. So let's start from the beginning, and let's go. What made you go into programming?
Okay, so I've always had an interest in computers. I've loved just doing everything on the computer, from when my dad had like an old DOS IBM laptop. I used to like play games on floppy disks and just thought that was the coolest thing, when I was, I don't know, like 3 or something. And then from there, just kind of loved video games and loved computer games. I was around for like AOL and chat rooms and stuff, Napster, all that stuff. And then in college, kind of got into a little bit of a CS degree, but I quickly bailed out of that. I had a professor that on the first day of our intro to computer science class, he strode into the 300-person auditorium that was kind of like half empty. And he was kind of disheveled and unkept, and had long hair and a big beard, and was kind of scraggly looking. And he jumped up in front of the class and he said, "Little news in the life of," I won't say his name, but we'll call him Robert. "Little news in the life of Robert. I just found out my former best friend was sleeping with my ex-wife." And then he started class from there. And so that kind of set the tone, and you can kind of imagine like he was really phoning it in for that whole 2 semesters that I suffered through his course. But we learned Java. We coded Java in Notepad.exe and ran everything from like Windows command line. Never used an IDE during that time. Never actually touched anything with a GUI until the very last assignment of the second semester, where we made a Hangman game that was absolutely terrible. And so from there, I was like so aggravated and frustrated with programming and computer science. I was like, I'm never gonna achieve this goal of being a programmer because I haven't even made anything useful in a whole year of doing it. So how am I supposed to get a job doing this? And so I was just completely discouraged. I changed majors to Japanese language, finished my degree with that, did some time in Japan as a foreign exchange student, had a great time, and then came back to the States. Didn't know what I was going to do with my life. Didn't really want to pursue more of like that Japanese translator track or some kind of job living in Japan. So I got into the fire department and being a paramedic and an EMT. Did that for 4.5 years, then became a registered nurse. Worked in critical care, the emergency room, and also surgical nursing. So recovered a lot of patients, did a lot of critical care, and during that time, just found myself sitting down at my desk, like pulling up free code camp and kind of doing like Python tutorials or something. Um, and so one day, my boss at the time, in a trauma center ER, walked up to me and saw me doing like Python tutorials, and she's just like, "Lee, what are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know, just kind of messing with programming. Always had an interest in it." And then she kind of looked at me and she's like, "Well, nursing, you really got to want it." And I was like, "You know what? You're right. I don't want it." And so I got into a coding boot camp. I took the UCF coding boot camp, and I did really well. I loved it, and got a job straight out of that. So did the part time program, worked as a nurse by day, went to the coding boot camp by night, and at the end of it, got hired like the week that I graduated, and have been kind of like hit the ground running and been running ever since.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's a great story. And like, thank you for being in the medical field. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am now if it wasn't for you guys, like at the time. So that's like great respect.
Can I tell
Yeah.
you a crazy story about that? I don't want to tell
Mhm.
war stories for the podcast, but one day I had a patient in ICU. So like the sickest, you know, people go to that unit in the hospital. And this guy was a programmer. And I was like, man, I'm really jealous that you're a programmer because I've always wanted to do that. And he's like, man, I'm really jealous that you're a nurse because I've always wanted to kind of work with people. And the guy actually, while he was there, he's very sick, but he actually had his heart stopped, and so we saw it on the monitor. And it was like, oh man, he flatlined. We actually ran in there with the cart and put the pads on him and defibrillated him or shocked him back to life. And he came out of me, he was like, "Oh my God, was I dead?" We're like, "Yeah, you were dead, but now you're alive." He's like, he was so grateful, and it was just a really, I'll never forget that story. But every time I think about like reflecting on nursing and programming as professions, I kind of think of that like Freaky Friday kind of moment where he wanted to do what I was doing and I wanted to do what he was doing.
And then like in those like movies in the 80s, like you switched.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
There was some music video I saw recently. I forgot who it was. I think it was, it's a rap video, but I forgot who it was. But anyway, I want to get back like a programming on Notepad. Like I grew up in communist country basically, and when I started my first year of university was like we programmed on paper. Like there was so many of us that they forced us to program on paper, and then I had so much trouble passing that course because it was you had this guy who takes your work back if you didn't put a semicolon in the end. Like, and I was like, how on earth should I know that? I don't have a debugger in my head. I mean, if you want to talk about the logic and pseudo algorithm, like let's talk about. No, he didn't want to hear it. So I was dealing with that, and a lot of us. Uh, I mean, not a lot of us made it to the second year. Let me put it like that. So it was, which kind of brings me also to we're going to talk about a bit about it later, but about the education that I would like to talk about, and what is really necessary and what is really not necessary, and do we need to go through those trenches that we went through. Um, so tell me about, where are you now? What are you doing now?
So currently I work as a front end developer for realtruck.com. which is an e-commerce company out of Ocala, which is a little bit north of Orlando. And we work on a code base that's run on Vue and Nuxt, which is a server-side rendering framework for Vue. And what we built is a platform for all of our different branded sites. So we've got a number of different companies under our kind of umbrella company, and each one of those companies has its own website, but really they're all e-commerce sites. So the only difference between them is kind of like the homepage and maybe like the about page. And then beyond that, it's kind of the same, you know, you can still search by vehicle and pull up like parts and all that stuff. So under the hood, it's really all the same components and stuff, and just kind of switching themes between them. So that's what I do Monday through Friday. And, we've got a backend team that works with like AWS for all of our APIs. And then we have some folks that work with some more antiquated systems to actually handle the lower level kind of data that then gets kind of filtered through AWS into the actual website.
Hmm.
Um, so I do a lot of, like work with JavaScript and Vue, CSS, all that good stuff.
So it's mostly front end, or is it kind of back end? I mean,
So I'm on the front end team. I was just kind of explaining like how the entire stack of the site works.
no, that's great. So do you guys use any like MongoDB or something like that, like saving? I don't know. I mean, the way we use MongoDB in my on my end, in my old job, is that we use MongoDB to like save searches and like small stuff, and then whatever big data there was coming through, because it was like hotels, information about the hotels, like details and stuff like that, that was coming from the back end, right? So we kind of used a combo of all of the things.
We use a number of third party services for different things. So like we've got a blog that's run through Contentful, and then like our search provider is Algolia, and we just kind of like compose all these different services and technologies to work with our site, and then through our actual like AWS APIs.
How do you like the current industry? So do you enjoy it, or
Like e-commerce,
yeah? So e-commerce basically.
it's I think I got lucky. I think I have a great team. It's a small team that actually runs everything. And I'm the newest member to the team, so they're very supportive. We do a lot of pair programming, and code reviews are kind of gentle. Um, so I mean, I really can't complain about it. And of course, I love Vue. I love working with Nuxt. Previously, I was working with like Angular and TypeScript, and some older tech like Angular JS, um, and then working with a lot of kind of third party solutions to things. And so previously, I worked as a consultant for a management consulting firm. So, are you familiar with that kind of operation? Or
No, not much, honestly.
okay, so basically, this is a like let's say that your company um, isn't a tech company, and they have some kind of product that requires a technical solution. So instead of that company hiring on developers and like staffing an entire team building the product and then downsizing or laying off the people that they don't need to maintain it, they would hire a third party to come in and build it for them. So they would give them the requirements. The third party company would charge them a lot more than maybe it would cost them in house to do it, but they handle all of the staffing and the actual like architecture decisions and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so that consulting job, it was a lot of we worked with financial services. So we would build out like applications for banks, um, kind of working with like APIs that work with like really, really old bank systems. And then we would have like our own integration layer that would then talk to the front end. So
Oh, you're kind of now in my current branch, so now I'm dealing with a lot of banks, and I know quite a bit about their systems. Let me put it
Yeah,
like
it's a
that.
little scary to kind of get into that because like some of that stuff is running on COBOL in a basement somewhere and like nobody has touched it in decades. So
Yeah, it's the whole mentality of ain't broke, don't fix it. So,
right.
and there, I mean, I even remember like it was like 2012 when I was doing my master's degree, but there was someone visiting from IBM, and they were doing like a showcase of their latest and greatest mainframe computer at that end. So it was fully supported for COBOL, and most of the banks and most of the companies in the financial industry buy those. So it still runs on COBOL, and that was the scary part. But there is also like a separate processor for Java, even, but that's a different story. But yeah, it's scary how a lot of banks are running on old software, but probably it was written very good. I don't know. But
Yeah, I don't know. It's like you communicate with that with like a SOAP format or something, and then you take that and translate it to like a modern REST API or something, and then that actually talks to the stuff that you're using, day to day, like in the real world.
yeah,
So it's a very interesting system.
yeah, it is. And if you, I mean, for all those developers who want to learn about it, like if you ever want to do COBOL, there's a lot of like openings for that, and they pay a hefty sum just for doing COBOL. They'll even teach you if you need it. Like it's that bad, so no one wants to do COBOL.
I've actually
And
read that hospitals have a similar system. They have some kind of proprietary language or framework or something, and it's like a dead language basically. And so there's jobs out there for it, but kind of nobody wants to touch that stuff, and they can't really find people to do it. And there's really no job track for it. There's no advancement.
yeah, it is a problem. You work at Real Truck in your e-commerce industry. I wanted to know, is e-commerce good for junior developers to start in? Most of the companies on the market are mostly doing e-commerce, as far as I understood. You have, if you want to work for big companies like Google and Facebook and stuff like that, you need a bigger set of skills. But to get started, I think e-commerce is a good place to start. Do you agree or not?
Yeah, I don't think it's bad by any stretch. I mean, between the two, where I was working with the management consulting, so like lots of different projects, different tech stacks, some older than maybe you would hope for, and the e-commerce company. I obviously prefer the e-commerce stuff. The tech stack is much more palatable. It's like newer and modern, and the people that I work with are very interested in performance. They're very interested in UX, UI. They want the best experience because they are constantly, thinking about conversion rates. So, if somebody's on the site and they have a poor experience, or the site's maybe janky or doesn't work very well, or they're waiting a little bit longer for something to load, that's money that's lost because that person is disincentivized from actually buying something. So it really directly affects the company's bottom line. And so they place a lot of value on us to create this platform and maintain it and make sure that it's like top notch so that the customer has the best experience possible. Um, and maybe with a bank, for instance, you have to use a bank. Like there's no negotiating around that, unless you're putting money like in your mattress or something. So I think that maybe the bank sees it as like an expense, whereas for the e-commerce company, that's like their main bread and butter. That's where they make their profits. So I think that there's a lot more focus on performance and best practices and stuff, at least in my limited experience.
Yeah, you're kind of right about that. Kind of nailed it on the head, honestly. So, coding standards. How are you guys handling that?
It's a little bit looser maybe than you would think. We kind of get together as a group. There's five of us on the front end team. And so when we have to make like an architecture decision, maybe we'll have like a group meeting, and we'll have like the director and then the front end team lead and then whoever is kind of implementing this change, and just have a discussion of like what makes the most sense, what's the most maintainable, readable, usable, what's the least evil thing that we can do to the code base to kind of not negatively affect performance or maintainability. We don't really have, I wouldn't say, a set group of rules for coding standards. Like we use a linter, we use prettier. We've kind of got some stuff in place to help, but they've kind of built into the project itself kind of certain areas to do certain things. But I mean, every day is a learning process with how we're going to handle uh, different challenges in the code base. So, for instance, recently I was tasked with rewriting the authentication code. And so all of that stuff was in the Vuex store, so in our state management library and kind of global data. And really, that's a very small portion of our user base because most people will click on like a truck part or something and then just check out as a guest through like PayPal or Stripe or something like that. And they don't actually create an account with us. So it had been kind of a tacked on feature while they were iterating quickly to get the site up and running. And so they wanted to circle back now that they had me on the team and see if I could improve the code because we were bringing in a third party bundle through NPM. It was the AWS Amplify package. And so that was being loaded even for people that weren't logged into the site and didn't actually use the account feature. And so when I rewrote it, I was able to lazy load the AWS Amplify package to only kick in and get downloaded when somebody actually tried to log into the site or create an account. And so we saw like pretty decent performance gains from that. I couldn't tell you the numbers off the top of my head, but like 90 millisecond load times or something, and you know, maybe like 200 kilobytes of JavaScript over the wire or something like that that we knocked off. And it sounds small, but all that stuff adds up. Um, Especially when you're talking about a big production code base that has Google Analytics, metrics, iterable, contentful, Stripe, PayPal, things to handle like pop-ups and um, just a lot of third-party libraries that you're loading in that like we need for marketing, to better um, create content for the customers. But we, as developers, kind of like are tasked with delivering that in a way that doesn't make the site load in 20 seconds or something ridiculous. So I wouldn't say, back to your question, that we have like any set in stone coding standards or nothing formal that I could refer back to on paper or as a reference or anything. But we do have a process where the more experienced members of the team will get together and discuss what we think would be the best implementation.
Yeah, to me, what I'm getting out of it is that it's a very dynamic environment, right? So there are new libraries coming out every year. So there's a new, front end technology every year. That's the most dynamic and that's most, upfront technology. So back end doesn't change that much as often. So I kind of see your point. I mean, changes there, you make changes often, and so you don't. I mean, you have certain way of writing things, and that's what I kind of mean by coding standards. So let's write a function like this, or let's keeping the naming similar, so we just know what's going on. Because today you're writing in Vue, tomorrow who knows? I mean, it might be something else. It's like React, Vue, Angular. I worked at, I don't know if you remember Knockout JS like years ago. So that was my start, like making everything observable. But the point is, every technology is uh, solves a certain problem, but probably it creates two more on the side. But with that being said, so uh, when developers get out of college or course or university, they're taught like one framework, right? So they should always, I mean, they should like that framework, but they should not be they should be open to learning other frameworks. If Do you agree on that, or
So I think college itself, the industry, especially front end development, everything moves so quickly that it's almost impossible for a college course to land on a curriculum that is absolutely modern and up to date. There's a lot of review processes and kind of administrative processes that are going to slow down the adoption of any changes to a curriculum, especially at a collegiate level. And so what you end up with is kind of a system where you go to college and you learn just kind of general programming principles and things like recursion and object oriented programming or some such. And you don't actually, like, if you went to college and you thought, I'm going to, be a CS degree major or information science or something, and you think that you're going to learn React, you're probably not. I mean, you may touch like JavaScript at some point, but I don't think you're going to learn a modern front end framework. And I think that that's probably the same case. Like, I wouldn't expect to go to college and to learn Go, for instance, or some of the newer like Kotlin or something like that, a newer language. Um, I would expect to go and learn Java or C++ or C or something like that, and even lower level things. So from my own podcast, interviewing a lot of people in the industry that had gone through degree programs and gotten bachelor's degrees and master's degrees and such things, that of the same story, it comes up over and over again. They get out of college, they kind of learn like something lower level like C++, um, or C or something, or worked with like, building a compiler or something crazy. And then they get into applying jobs and the jobs are asking for totally different skill sets. So I hear things like, I went to college and I didn't even learn object-oriented programming. I went to college and I didn't learn version control. Um, I didn't learn how to build any real life applications. So this theme that I keep hearing over and over again is that it doesn't really matter if you go to college or not, or if you go through a coding boot camp or you're self-taught. Most of the skills that you need in the industry, you're probably going to have to go out and get yourself.
uh, on my end, it's I don't know. I'm more of a I went through the entire you know master's degree. I went all the way up. I even wanted to go like for PhD, but and I almost got into Stanford, by the way, with that. But what I figured out at the time, like, okay, I'm running late with my age. I don't know. I mean, if I go into PhD somewhere, I need to get out in the world and start, you know, doing some programming, real programming. What I learned, yes, I mean, I when I got out of university, I thought I was the God's gift to programmers all over the world, right? So I thought my code was so fabulous that um, everyone would be in awe, like looking at my code, right? Which turns out not to be true as soon as you get your first job, right? So, so then you realize how much you don't know. And, I did at that time realized how much I didn't know. And what I didn't know, like I knew 30 ways to, you know, sort a list or, to organize a binary tree in different ways. But one thing I didn't learn is how to write code that other people can read at the same time. And that's what kind of got me on this podcast. And the whole thing is a lot of kids these days coming out of college uh, don't have that idea of teamwork. They know how to create things. So yes, you need to learn a certain set of skills. But I think what the problem is that maybe the education is kind of falling behind on the uh, latest and greatest, but it's also the industry, falling behind on the latest and greatest. So some things need to be introduced, like in the education. And I don't think programming can be learned in 30 days. So it's you have to learn it for the rest of your life, like every day. Even I'm learning like to this day and reading up and brushing up on skills and So should everyone, And the way I see it, the technology I'm working in now won't be there maybe in 5 years, 10 years. So I have to be ready to switch, right? So you always have to be on your toes, like for what's going on. And the industry, and just to wrap it up, the industry is kind of falling behind because when I'm doing my job search, and I had a couple in the States, it's like, uh yes, the latest and greatest front end technology is now Vue and stuff like that, but there was still some jobs offering job openings with Angular 1.6, right? So the way I see it, like even if it's a crappy job, at least gets your foot into the door, or it's some technology you didn't want to work on, but you need to start off somewhere, right?
Sure. Yeah. Um, and I'm not really trying to beat on college education and saying that it's useless or anything. I'm just saying that if your expectation is to go through college and be adequately and absolutely prepared to take a programming job straight out of that without doing your own self learning, you're probably going to be in for a rude awakening.
Yeah, and that's for every, I mean, if even not just university, but even the 30-day courses or boot camps or a full PhD, even if you get that and you get out of that university and you think that you know everything, you don't. You just it's just the tip of the iceberg. That's the sad part. So
Yeah, so I have a small anecdote about this. So when I was in fire school learning to be a fireman, I had an instructor come up one day and he was kind of lecturing us. And he said, if you want to be a fireman, you have to be a student of the game. And I looked at him like, he was from Mars. I was like, what does that mean? And that's silly. And kind of what he said was, I go home and I read Firehouse magazine. I go to conferences. Like I train on my days off. I look up videos on YouTube of like how to fight fires and kind of tactics and stuff. And at the time, I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Um, when I'm at home, I want to do my own thing. I don't want to study how to put fires out, in my days off and stuff. And so, what I kind of came to realize was basically that wasn't the job for me. And it's not that, you know, it's wrong to not spend all of your time off studying your job. But, you know, first of all, like the fire department is a life or death situation, so you better be good at it and you better be into it. Um, because, when that time comes, either you're going to get hurt or somebody else is going to get hurt. Um, and so programming is kind of the same situation, but minus the life and death aspect. With programming, things are changing so quickly, and there's so much to learn and so much to know that you can't really rely on a third party, school or boot camp or whatever to teach you all the stuff that you need to know. You really need to stay up to date with it yourself and take care of your own continuing education. And that means the same stuff. Read magazines, follow people on Twitter that are talking about, programming, watch YouTube videos, go to conferences, listen to podcasts, all that good stuff.
start a podcast.
Yeah, start your own podcast. Hey, why not? Right? Everybody else has one.
Yeah, great. So let's get back uh, you. And so, what is the team structure? So you mentioned there was like 5 developers, front end developers that you meet up. Is there like some sort of hierarchy, or is it like every man for himself, or one to rule them all? And how is it set up? Mhm.
It's pretty simple. There's I guess 3 developers, myself included, that are kind of we just do the day-to-day stuff. And then we have a front-end team lead who's above us, and he's like our resource or go-to person to ask questions and help us understand maybe some intricacies in the code base or ask architecture questions. And then above him is a more senior person that's our front-end director, and he kind of gets the final say on whether or not something smells right to him, basically. And he does a lot of stuff like test the site for performance, check like our bundle size, look at our scores in like different kinds of performance software and that sort of thing.
Oh, That's pretty good, I have to say. Um, so in the team, there needs to be communication. So what brings me to my next question, and I think it's a bit of a sensitive topic, but introvert versus extrovert, right? And hear me out on that. To me, I consider myself introvert, but my opinion is in order to make it somewhere, you have to talk to people. You cannot be all to yourself. If you want to improve and move up the ranks, you have to be able to communicate. At least on my end, I'm the bridge that's kind of connecting the developers and the management, right? Which they are non-tech and the developers are a bit tech, right? So you need constant communication. So to you, is there such a thing as like introvert, extrovert? Is it a problem in the workplace, or how should juniors deal with it in a way?
Yeah, I think that. So first of all, the days of "Hey Marco, go write me a program" are over. We're dealing with levels of complexity now that kind of mandate that it's a team effort. And so that means that, you're going to be doing a lot of meetings, you're going to be dealing with code reviews, you're going to be asking for help. Uh, and so if you're this person that just can't communicate at all, um, you're going to have to face that at some point. I personally am an introverted person. Believe it or not, despite the podcast and having a meetup and all this stuff, I'm very shy. I don't feel comfortable in social situations and out in public and that sort of thing. I'm very happy to be at my desk coding,
Hmm.
but at the same time, like you can imagine as a nurse and a firefighter and all the jobs I had before that, you have to get over that and you have to put yourself out there and deal with the the feeling of like how awkward it is to communicate with people and interact with people. And through doing that over and over again, it's just become less and less of a problem. So um, I know that there's a lot of programmers out there that are very shy and introverted, and like I feel your pain. But take this as a warning that you do need to work on that. That you can't just work on the code and the technology. There's a lot of communication involved with building software nowadays, and you really need to do work and make steps towards improving that. That's why, we constantly hear as developers about soft skills and how career changers are good because they bring previous experience in and they have this skill set where they can go and talk to customers, they can talk to, other businesses and they're used to dealing with meetings and all that sort of thing.
Which reminds me, like I'm like also an introvert, right? Besides the podcast, right? Then I'm kind of starting, and besides the band that I'm in, but that's the reason for it is not. I'm a thick-headed person. Let me put it like that. So I'm like, okay, you have a problem in bigger audiences, so like I might, you know, might I join a band? But then it happened so that I fell in love with it, and I fell in love with the whole chemistry and music, and throughout my years, I always try to combine both of those, like programming and music. But yeah, that's what kind of got me into the band is like, you need to learn how to face people. And I was a lead singer of a band like back in Serbia for like almost 10 years, and it took me forever, to ramp up. And I'm still, there's still a lot of things to learn. So you need to step out of your shell in order to, learn something new or improve. So to me, like the band whole thing kind of opened me up to people and kind of taught me how to communicate with them. Um, with that being said, let's move on. So is there what do you like more? Like, do you like the old school like waterfall methods, or is it agile or DevOps setup? How is it set up on your end? Which one do you prefer more?
So I'm not like an expert in this. I've been working for less than a year, so I haven't experienced the full gamut of software development practices or life cycles or however you want to call them. I can say that I've done I guess you would call it like Scrum and Agile, where you have sprints. And then I've also done Kanban, where you have like a backlog and you just peel off tickets as you go. Um, I kind of am not strongly opinionated about one or the other. I can tell you that currently at my work, we use Kanban and a backlog because the product is already live, it's built, it's in production, and now as things come our way, like we just add it to the list, and then every week we kind of like distribute tickets to people, and then we just work on it, and then it gets merged in. So it's very relayed back as opposed to like doing sprints and grooming sessions and all that stuff. Now, that being said, I think that there's a lot to be said about participating in grooming sessions and doing sprints because that's going to teach you a lot about what makes a good ticket or a good user story, and kind of working with QA and um, working with project managers and that sort of thing is very, very valuable as a developer, because the worst thing that can happen is you take a ticket that or a user story that is completely nondescript, and all of a sudden like QA is blowing you up saying, Lee, what this doesn't match the story. What you did is like so far outside the client's expectations. We need you to stay up all night until 3 a.m. and fix this ticket. You don't want to be in that situation. And so it's very good to learn how to, speak up for yourself and push back on what I would call like a bad user story or a bad ticket, and say like, what exactly do you want me to build? And is it possible?
Yeah. Well, to me, it's like as long as you are feeling like productive working on something, then the system is good. So there are different systems, and then whatever gets the job done. That's basically my motto, and that's what we're trying. Like also in my company, we're kind of now switching. Like you tried Agile, Kanban. Now we're want to try DevOps, and depending on the project. So it's kind of a you need to take a look at the big picture and see what will work. So if you have an existing product, like I did, like at my first job, same as you. So we did like uh, hotel information searches and stuff like that. So it's not just hotel; it's just tourism industry. So it was you were getting like plane tickets and ferry and stuff like that. But anyway, that's how we did our work. So everything come in through from the agents. We got a request, and then we created a task out of it. And then we, ranked it. Is this important? Is this less important? Blah blah blah. So and we felt productive. You know? And some situations you don't even know what you're building, and you're like, okay, just stick it to the wall and see if it works, right? And then based on the feedback, then you start introducing new things.
Yeah, as I understand it, no company actually sticks 100% to the Agile Manifesto. Everybody has their own take on it and their own practices, or they kind of pick and choose things that they want to implement. And so, like you said, you may be in a situation where you're doing no regrets development or something, and you're just trying to make something or prototype as fast as possible. And there's obviously drawbacks to that, but it depends on your company and your situation.
Yeah, I fully agree on that. So tell me about bit more about TechJR. So what got you guys started, and what's your mission, and how did you two meet, like, and connect?
So Eddie and I worked together at the management consulting firm that I mentioned earlier. Um, and we kind of got hired at the same time and got thrown onto this ridiculous code base at the same time. Um, and just kind of working together and being with a lot of newer developers, kind of like a bunch of excited people in the same room. Um, we started doing like talks in the office where we would have like a lunch and learn session on a Thursday, and we would kind of people would volunteer to present on a topic. And so naturally, I threw myself in the ring and kind of like took that head on. They looked at me and said like, "Oh, Lee already runs a meetup. Why don't we get him to do some speaking sessions?"
Hmm.
So I got roped into that, and then through that, I don't know what bit me and kind of made me think of doing a podcast. Looking back on it, I don't know what the heck I was thinking, but I ended up hanging out with Eddie like during lunch, and just kind of brought it up to him, and he had always been there at our meetup, the Project Code Experience meetup. and he's has like never missed one. He's always there recording our talks. And so I was like, asked him, "Hey, would you be interested in doing a podcast?" And he was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So we just kind of we mulled it over and talked about it, and then said, "Hey, let's just do it." And so I got into Gridsome, which is a static site generator for Vue. Made the site, figured out how to make my own RSS feed, figured out how to host my files on Amazon S3. Um, Kind of made the entire course, or not course, the entire podcast platform myself. And so now, like, I've got this whole system in place where I'm running my podcast for like 70 cents a month or something. But the whole ethos behind it, to like answer your question, is that I don't know why, but I've really felt like we don't do right by junior developers. We kind of get them halfway there and then just kind of let them flail. And I think that that is not productive as an industry. Like, we're not going to do better. We're not going to have better developers if people that come into the industry have a hard time. So, as a nurse, the nurses have a saying that's nurses eat their young. So, I think that developers eat their young. Um, there's a lot of stories out there about just hard times and bad practices with junior developers, and just coming into code reviews and they're crying when they leave, and the boss tells them that what you wrote sucks and just completely crushes their feelings. They come in to do an interview, and let's say that they're a front end developer, and they get asked to whiteboard a binary tree or something crazy, and it's just not productive to the industry. We should be doing more for these people and helping them, because there are more and more software jobs out there every day, and more juniors, but less and less junior positions. So we're really foot gunning ourselves as an industry, and that's just bugs the hell out of me. So I'm trying to do everything I can to kind of help people, because everybody was a junior at some point, and if you ever try and jump into a different tech stack, hey, guess what? You're going to be a junior in that. So
Yeah, it's one of those things where like you need 5 experience in the junior position, which you can't get. It's catch 22, like the famous thing, and that's heartbreaking. And it's like a sink or swim situation. I agree with you 100%. I felt like that when I got out of my college. I felt like that when I got to the States. And you know, thanks to the I found my first job through Craigslist. I mean, I'm ashamed to say. But yeah, it was really scary even when I got here. So you got from a country where no one knows you. So the only way, for me at least, is I started going to meetups. I started meeting people. I started getting myself known with the industry and the locals, and that kind of helped me a lot with my career. And I kind of suggest that to every junior there, that just start going up to meetups, start meeting people, start advertising yourself in a way that and that'll make the transition easier a bit until we figure out exactly how to help them, right?
yeah, even if you're a senior developer, some of the best things that you can do to get a new job or get a better job is just like you said. You need to get out there, meet other developers, do some networking, go to meetups, whatever, and just kind of raise your visibility in the industry. So when somebody's on their own team and they're like, "Man, we really need, a backend developer." Hey, I know Marco, he's always doing something cool at the backend developer meetup. Oh yeah, that's cool. Why don't you reach out to him? That's the way that you want to get into a job. What you don't want to do is sit at home and fire off 800 resumes through Indeed and just kind of sit back and pray. That's the wrong way to go about it. You're going to set yourself up for a lot of disappointment, because out of those 800 resumes you fire off, you may get 100 callbacks. And out of those 100 callbacks, you get 50 phone screens. Out of those 50 phone screens, you get 20 actual phone interviews. and then maybe a handful of in-person interviews, and then all of a sudden you're on a whiteboard doing like some kind of craziness. Whereas if you had gone out and met the team beforehand, you kind of already have a foot in the door. If they like you, they're already gonna, if they're familiar with you, they're gonna know what your code is like because they probably have seen your projects. They've already seen like your GitHub. They know what your passion is for the industry and what you're like as a developer, and that's really going to grease, your transition into that position a lot more than if you try and come in cold through, some kind of automated resume collection thing like Indeed.
Yeah. Well, and don't take it too hard, too much. I mean, don't get your heart broken. I know I got my heart broken like a bunch of times, and there's a bunch of stories I have with that. But uh, don't get heartbroken that the company A, B, or C didn't invite you back to an interview. I know that even like after my accident, and then I had to go back on the job market again, and until I found this job where I'm absolutely happy, it took me a while. It took me like 4 to 6 months of just sending out resumes and not getting back, and and it's a struggle. I mean, you need to, even though it seems like there's jobs left and right, you need to have quote unquote certain specific skills for that job. But there are a lot of issues with that. It's not just us as developers, it's also the HR that's posting the ad, and knowing what exactly they need, and how to beat those algorithms that not career, but the resume algorithms, and to get through and all that jazz. So yeah, you shouldn't take it too hard.
So let me say that as my first position in the management consulting gig, uh, right away, as soon as I got hired, I was kind of tasked with, and we all were brought into helping to hire for other positions. So we had not only some in that local office, but we would also help for projects that were spinning up in like Chicago or New York, Los Angeles, that sort of thing. So we would get resumes to us from like the recruiting team, and then it was our job to jump on the phone and have like a technical interview with these people, or have them come into our office and have like an in-person interview. So I got to see the other side of it right away. And I can tell you that, if a recruiter doesn't call you back in a timely manner, or you don't hear from somebody, or that you just get a no or you get nothing, don't take that stuff personal. There are so many things that can go wrong in that situation. And they are as simple as the recruiter forgot, or she gave you the wrong time because she's in a different time zone, or any number of things that can go wrong. So definitely don't be discouraged by that. And on the flip side, when you're applying to positions, um, there's kind of like, I forget the quote, but when you're reading the stuff on Indeed or whatever, the requirements for the job, those things are written like a child writes a wish list to Santa. It is completely fantastical stuff. Nobody out there exists that matches all that crap. So don't get discouraged just looking at that. If you can look at that and go, yeah, I know some of that, or I know most of that, go ahead and apply. And if they don't want you, fine. But it could be that you are the best candidate, because they're not hiring somebody that matches all those requirements. They're hiring the best person that applies. So you're in competition with whoever else is out there applying to the job. And if you are the most senior person they can get at 1 year experience, then hey, you're it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. And like, oh my God, we're already almost running to an hour, and there's so much I want to talk to you, and I definitely kind of want to bring you again in the future. But let's kind of bring it to a finisher then. Um, what is the last thing you learned? Like, quick, you don't need to elaborate too much, but just what is the last thing that you, up the top of your head, that you learned, like something new, so that it can be a new, I don't know, whatever. It can be even outside programming. So, you know,
Probably the last like actual technical thing that I learned. I've done a lot of research into Gatsby lately, which is another, one of 8 billion front end frameworks. But probably the last really technical thing that I kind of got into was some SEO requirements. So like meta tags and JSON LD schema, kind of the stuff that Google uses to rank your site, and also what indexers and stuff use to scrape your site and kind of like rank you in search engines. So I kind of didn't even know that stuff existed until recently. I kind of for the podcast, I was like, man, I should probably do some SEO work on the site and just kind of see what I can do. And so I got in and looked up all that, and then at work, I kind of took the initiative to ask my team lead, like, hey, what do we do for meta tags and for schema and stuff, and got to see what an actual e-commerce site does for that. So um, it was really interesting. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, or you've never heard of the stuff that I've said, um, there's some good tools uh, for parsing and kind of like checking uh, JSON LD schema. So like schema.org is like the resource for it. Google has their own tool to read the schema on your site and kind of determine what it can figure out about your web page. And there's also really good meta tag scraping stuff. So like when you post a link in Slack, for instance, and you get a picture and a description and stuff, all that's coming from the meta tags on your site. And like LinkedIn, Twitter, there's probably some other ones. Facebook probably has one, but you can paste a link into that and let it generate like a preview of what it can scrape from your site. So um, really helpful stuff.
In e-commerce, that is a really important thing, especially like, the the easier it is for people to find you, the more money basically they make. So yeah, that is really important. Any any hobbies that you enjoy, like out of work? I mean, we all need to unwind, right? So my thing is like music, Magic the Gathering. That's my thing. So what do you?
Oh man, awesome. I used to play Magic a long time ago when I was in like middle school and high school, but I haven't touched it in years.
Do you still have the
But
cards from that?
no, I sold all my cards to a friend. So
Oh, you would have like thousands of dollars now. It's like ridiculous. Like if you have that from the
maybe.
from that era. Like anyway. Yeah.
Um, no, what I mostly get into is I'll watch movies or whatever, but um, I love video games, so I love PC gaming. Uh, I love Zelda, like on the Switch and that sort of thing. And then like my biggest hobby is probably playing guitar. So I've also been in a couple bands here and there. Rock bands are notoriously hard to get organized and keep together. So
Oh, tell me
none of
about
them
it.
actually worked out.
Oh,
Yeah, it's always hard to get somebody that can like have a vehicle, have an instrument, and actually shows up,
well, that's
like,
the
and isn't drunk.
oh god, that's the reason I kind of stepped into bass. Like I was the lead vocal, right? And then we had problem with the bassist. Like one of the things you mentioned, like getting on time, doing this and that, and I was like, finally, okay, I'm gonna step on the bass. I don't care anymore. So I've gotta,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
play the guitar. I can learn how to play the bass, and like I'll try to pick it up. And I started, liking it a lot, and it's pretty cool. But yeah, um, so where can people find TechJR? Can you plug in some of the links and
Yeah,
contact?
absolutely. So you can find Tech Junior at techjr.dev or techjr.dev. That's our website with all our episodes, show notes, links, all that good stuff. You can also find us on pretty much every podcast app that you can think of. We're on iTunes, we're on Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all that good stuff. You can also follow the show at TechJR Podcast on Twitter. You can follow me at Lee Warrick Jr. and Eddie at ED0TER0. And I also have a website, leewarrick.com, if you want to see what my website looked like when I got hired. I haven't changed it since I got out of the boot camp.
Same.
Um, well,
Same.
I did that on purpose. Like I've wanted to circle back and make it like better and awesome, but I kind of want to leave it and just be like, hey, everybody, this is pretty much what you can get away with if you want to get hired. So it's not terrible or anything, but it could be better.
But
But yeah, and then if you have any um, questions about getting hired or being a junior developer or whatever, you can reach out to me at leewarrick@gmail.com. And then please come out to our meetup. It's on meetup.com/project-code-experience. And it's a meetup for junior developers in Orlando. So we have lots of intro talks, workshops, kind of professional development stuff, freelancing, resumes, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I might even show up on that meeting as well. So that's definitely I'm interested in it. And let's wrap it up with can you share something that happened but outside the world of programming and development, something that you would like to share, plug in?
You mean like maybe something I'm into, or
Yeah, something that
kind of
you're
like?
into, something that kind of caught your fancy, right?
I'll throw out my favorite band if that's of interest to anybody. So as a Japanese major and kind of like a fan of Japanese culture, I'm a huge fan of this band called Siam Shade, SIAM SHADE, and it's like this arena rock Asian band that was really really big in like the 90s and early 2000s, and they're just like phenomenal musicians. So definitely check them out. And then if you're like kind of into more modern stuff, my other favorite band I would say is called Asian Kung Fu Generation, which is a completely dumb name and crazy, but they have just like really nailed this kind of alternative grunge sound that I just am in love with. So definitely check those two out.
Will do. There's one like I get back to every once in a while. That's the only like Japanese band I'm listening to. It's Kana Boon, and I think they did the theme song to Naruto, one of the
Okay.
animes that I watched. So, and there's a song that they released. I don't understand anything that's happening, but I don't know. I just like the rhythm and the whole video. It's cute, but I don't know.
If you're into anime, definitely check out One Punch Man. That's an amazing
Oh,
show.
that's on my watch list. I need to watch that. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, take care of that immediately, and you'll love the theme song.
Yeah. So it's like, I watched a bunch of anime, but it's like I kind of stopped because I don't know, the shows went way too long with the episodes, and I just couldn't keep track of. So, and that's where I stuck like with mostly the movies. So I watched like longer movie, like Akira and like the old school stuff.
Okay,
So, but
cool. Well, if you ever need anime suggestions, I'm your man. I
definitely.
know all the good ones.
Definitely, I'll keep that in mind. But thank you again. Thank you again for taking time away uh, for doing this podcast episode. Um, and thank you for sharing like your knowledge. And I think it was very helpful, like to especially like junior developers. And I hope that people will go to your podcast and get more into it because I think it's a great podcast and deserves a listen.
Well, thank you, and thank you so much for having me. And please let me come back on the show, and we can kind of get further into some of this stuff.
Yeah, there's more stuff I want to get into. Like I want to get especially about junior devs and that mindset and getting into. So yeah, but next time definitely we'll get more into it. So now it's like a introduction. But yeah, well, thank you again. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for listening to an episode of Backend Bear Podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Backend Bear and on Facebook at Backend Bear Podcast. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to send them via Twitter or just email me at marco@backendbear.com. Any other information or anything that you would like to know, it can be found at backendbear.com. Thank you again, and until next time, ta-da!